we are going to begin with the COVID-19 situation in South Korea and the continuing wave of Omicron. The country will see new daily infections easily top 200,000 again on this Monday, and that's a sharp increase from just 1 week ago.
For more on this, we're joined in our studio by Lee Seung-jae. Good morning.
Good morning to you guys.
So, like always, let's start with the general figures. How many new COVID-19 cases are we expecting today?
So we're expected to see pretty high numbers for a Monday tally. Of course, as of 9 p.m. Sunday, the figure stood at 200,045. Now, it is a decrease of over 31,000 from the day before. But again, considering it's a weekend figure, it is still a sharp rise, and we should expect close to 230,000 for the total daily tally. Now, it's also an increase of 1.5 times the figure reported a week ago and 2.1 times more compared to 2 weeks ago. Now, the big question remains, when will the number of cases in the country peak before we eventually see a downward trend again? Well, looking at the past week, there's been a continuous rise, figures even surpassing 260,000 last week with a 7-day average of 208,000. Now, experts say the country could see figures in the 300,000s before we do reach that very peak.
Now, naturally, high daily infection numbers are one cause for concern. Another deep cause for concern, increasingly so, is the rise in the number of COVID-related deaths.
That's right. So one of the things that we've been watching very closely is the critically ill patients, not to mention the death numbers as well. So if you look at just the Saturday numbers, the country saw 216 deaths from COVID-19. This, of course, the highest figure yet. But over the past week, we've been seeing triple-digit figures almost on a daily basis. Now, from February 27 to March 5th, the total accumulative deaths from COVID-19 stood at 1,013. Now, if you compare that to the figures from 2 weeks ago, 539 deaths. It's almost double the number that we're seeing right now. So if you consider the fact that South Korea exceeded 1,000 total deaths from COVID-19 for the entire pandemic in January 2021, 1,000 a week is a pretty concerning figure. Now, the death toll is mainly occurring amongst the elderly population over the age of 70, but we are seeing more and more younger people succumbing to the virus. So if you take a look at the Saturday numbers once again, among the 216 deaths, 136 were those over 80, accounting for 63%, followed by 44 in their 70s, 21 in their 60s. But we also saw 9 deaths from those in their 50s, 4 in their 40s, 1 in their 30s and 20s. Now, experts do forecast that at the very peak, the daily death toll could be 2 to 3 times higher than it is right now.
But SJ, the South Korean government has eased some social distancing restrictions last week, and this was more specifically by extending hours. Can you tell us more on that?
Right. So there was some concerns as whether or not these ease measures are going to be timely at this time. But you're right. So starting Saturday, the government did ease the elements of the social distancing rules by extending the operating hours of 12 kinds of multi-use facilities. This, of course, including cafes and restaurants by 1 hour to 11 p.m. in order to better support these small merchants. Now, the new curfew will be effective until March 20th, while the current 6-person cap on private gatherings will remain in place. Now, many small business owners welcome the news. However, some say, well, it's not enough.
It's better than nothing, but there are still a lot of complaints. Many drinking and entertainment venues still find it more difficult to do business.
That's right. Of course, citizens have also voiced their concerns as well, especially because the daily figures have yet to peak, with many of the children still unvaccinated. They're fearing that with the extended business hour, the infection numbers will continue to soar as well.
Yes, that's a cause for concern, but going into effect from this Monday as well, there is going to be a new exception to those who have to submit negative PCR tests if they are newly arriving in Korea from another country.
That's right. So despite the fact that we are seeing these soaring numbers, we are seeing more and more of the easing of some of these restrictions. So like you said, I mean, starting today, inbound Koreans who have been treated for COVID-19 10 to 40 days before departure will not have to submit a negative PCR test before arrival or even before boarding the plane. Now, instead, they can submit documentation that shows the date of COVID-19 infection. Of course, prior to this, from last July, the government made it mandatory for all inbound travelers to submit a negative test when, of course, entering the country.
Now, we're just 2 days away from South Korea's presidential elections, and the government also plans to, improve ways for COVID-19 patients to cast their ballots.
Right, so certainly unprecedented right now, all the things that are happening at this time, because there were some issues during the early voting for people isolated or infected on Saturday. Now, with the high number of patients in quarantine, I mean, many took to the polling stations early only to find themselves waiting in long lines in the cold. Now, that's because the outdoor temporary voting booths where the confirmed patients could vote were not announced in advance, meaning voters were unsure where to go and had to wait in the cold with fears of their symptoms could worsen. Now, health authorities did say that they will look into ways to reduce the waiting time for the voters after collecting opinions from different people.
All right, we'll have to see what kind of changes we're expecting for Election Day. SJ, thank you so much for your efforts today.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you very much.